Monday, 7th October, 1985. A lone Italian cruise ship named Achille Lauro arrived and stopped at Egypt's port of Alexandria. This was the 5th day of the cruise ship's journey, which had started from the Italian city of Genoa. A total of 748 passengers and 450 crew members were on board. At Alexandria port, 651 passengers had disembarked from the ship and boarded buses. These people were heading toward the pyramids for a Cairo tour. After their departure, the ship's captain exited Alexandria port and redirected the cruise ship, along with the remaining 97 passengers, 225 kilometers west toward Egypt's Port Said. Here, after 14 hours, the tourists going to Cairo were supposed to rejoin the cruise ship. Up to this point, everything had gone according to plan. But after this, things started to go wrong. 14 hours later, the tourists returning from Cairo arrived at Port Said at exactly 10:30 p.m., expecting to rejoin their companions. But there was no sign of the Achille Lauro. At first, they were told that the cruise ship had been delayed due to traffic in the Suez Canal. But when the ship still did not arrive even after 3 hours of waiting, they were finally told the truth. It turned out that the Achille Lauro itself had been hijacked. Among the remaining 97 passengers, there were also 4 hijackers. They had apparently hidden their weapons inside a fuel tank because their room smelled very strongly. Right after leaving Alexandria port, they sat in their room drying their weapons with the help of a hairdryer. Just then, a waiter arrived to serve fruit, and the room was accidentally left open. Perhaps they were not supposed to hijack the ship so close to Alexandria port. But since their cover had already been blown, they immediately rushed to the ship's dining hall and began terrifying the passengers and taking them hostage. Seeing this, nobody knew who they were or what their objective was. One hostess asked them who they were, and one of them replied that they were Norwegian nationals. Before the hijackers could reach the ship's radio room, the operator sitting there managed to broadcast an SOS call, informing that the Achille Lauro had been hijacked. This SOS call was received by a radio station in Sweden. The hijackers were unaware of this SOS message. They took control of the radio room and shut down the ship's communication system. One hijacker announced over the loudspeaker for the ship captain to come to the front bridge. When Captain Gerardo arrived, he was welcomed with several shots fired from a machine gun. The hijacker shouted something loudly in Arabic, and then, in broken English, ordered the ship to sail toward the Syrian port of Tartus, 500 kilometers away. This was the point when the ship captain realized that these could not possibly be Norwegian nationals. They also ordered the captain to tell the 450 crew members to continue performing their duties normally, but not to come near any of the hostages. Under the threat of guns, the captain had no option except to obey the hijackers' orders. The Achille Lauro was now sailing from Egypt's Port Said towards Syria. Meanwhile, the hostages and the ship's crew had no idea what was going to happen to them. The sun of 7th October was about to set, and the hijackers ordered all the hostages to sleep on the floor. On the other side, the SOS message received by the Swedish radio station had already caused panic around the world. The Italian crisis management team had become active because it was an Italian ship. However, at first they did not take the case very seriously. But when they learned that there were American nationals aboard the cruise ship, the American crisis management team also became involved. In their eyes, this was a terrorist attack, and they had no policy of negotiating with terrorists. But the issue was that by now, 3 different countries had already been affected by this hijacking. The passengers were American, the ship belonged to Italy, and the incident had occurred in Egyptian territory. So now the debate was about which country should take action. The United States believed that since the ship belonged to Italy, Italy should take action first. But the Italian government wanted to resolve the hijacking through negotiations rather than by force, because Italy did not want to damage its reputation among Mediterranean countries. However, the United States wanted to deal harshly with the hijackers. Therefore, it warned all countries on the Mediterranean coast not to allow the Achille Lauro to dock at their ports. The next morning, on the 8th of October, the Achille Lauro had reached near Syria. The captain requested permission to dock at Tartus port. But since the United States had already alerted everyone, the Syrian authorities gave no response. After this, the hijackers began separating the hostages, according to their nationalities. It appeared that they were specifically searching for Americans and Jews. They separated a total of 20 passengers, including an elderly couple, Marilyn Klinghoffer, and her 69-year-old wheelchair-bound husband, Leon Klinghoffer. They were ordered to move to the upper deck, but Leon Klinghoffer could not go upstairs due to his condition. His wife screamed when they tried to separate her from him, but the hijackers silenced her at gunpoint. Leon Klinghoffer was extremely angry about this and continuously abused the hijackers. For a long time, the Achille Lauro was not granted permission to enter Syria. Finally, the hijackers communicated their demands to the Syrian authorities over the radio. One of the crew members, who appeared to be their leader, announced over the radio that they belonged to the PLF, the Palestine Liberation Front, and they wanted Israel to release 50 of their comrades. Everything had now become clear. The people pretending to be Norwegians were actually Palestinians. The hijacker's name was Yusuf Majed al-Molki, and he finally declared that if their demands were not met by 3 p.m., they would begin killing the Jews aboard the ship one by one. Now the case had become even more complicated, because 3 more parties had become directly involved: Syria, Israel, and Palestine. The deadline given by the hijackers was getting closer, but neither were their demands fulfilled, nor could any negotiation team reach the ship. At 3 p.m., they sent a message to Tartus port, saying that they had killed 1 American passenger and that another would be next. But the Tartus officials paid no attention to their claim and told them to leave the area. When the hijackers realized that nothing was going to work there, they ordered the captain to sail towards Cyprus. During this time, rumors had already spread through intelligence networks that an American passenger had been killed. However, on the other hand, there was still no confirmation of this claim. Italy then directly contacted Palestinian President Yasser Arafat, who was also the chairman of the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, and asked whether the PLO had any involvement in this hijacking. Yasser Arafat not only disowned the hijacking, but also sent a negotiation team to Egypt to help resolve the matter. Among this team was Abu Abbas, the leader of the PLF. Abu Abbas contacted the hijackers through a radio station in Cyprus and instructed them to immediately head toward Egypt's Port Said and to treat all passengers properly. Mulki, who was the leader of the hijackers, accepted Abu Abbas's instructions and ordered the captain to sail toward Egypt's Port Said. Upon reaching Egypt, Abu Abbas even apologized to the captain and also held private discussions with the hijackers. In reality, Italy and Egypt wanted to end this matter without bloodshed, because this was essentially an issue between Palestine and Israel, and no one wanted their own land to become dirty because of somebody else's conflict. But the United States believed that these were terrorists, and that no negotiations of any kind should take place with them. Despite American protests, negotiations had already begun. Italy and Egypt wanted the hijackers to be handed over to the PLO, which would then punish them itself for hijacking the ship. The next day, on 9th October, Captain Gerardo publicly delivered a radio message, assuring everyone that all passengers and crew aboard the ship were completely safe. After this message, Italy and Egypt decided to grant the hijackers safe passage. A tugboat was sent to the Achille Lauro, and the 4 hijackers boarded it, reached mainland Egypt, and disappeared. Everyone believed that the negotiations had succeeded and that the hijackers had withdrawn their demands. But in reality, the hijackers had forced Captain Gerardo at gunpoint to broadcast that message. Yes, when the Syrian officials were refusing to grant permission to the ship, the hijackers had actually killed a passenger, and that passenger was the wheelchair-bound Leon Klinghoffer. The hijackers threw Klinghoffer's body into the sea. This news, which emerged several hours later, caused massive outrage. The people who had been released were actually responsible for a major crime and had now disappeared onto Egyptian soil. Now all attention and pressure shifted toward Egypt. Italy demanded that Egypt hand over the hijackers to them, but Egypt was also trying to distance itself from the matter. Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak stated that the hijackers had already left Egypt and that he had no idea where they were now. But in reality, American intelligence received information that Egypt was putting them aboard a plane headed for Tunisia, where PLO representatives would take them into custody.
On 10th October at 6 p.m., a civilian aircraft of Egypt Air was scheduled to depart, carrying the 4 hijackers toward Tunisia. But neither the hijackers, nor Italy, nor Egypt knew that the American Crisis Management Team was planning to intercept this aircraft in midair. 4 F-14 fighter jets, 2 Ka-6D tankers, and 2 E-2C radar planes began patrolling over the Mediterranean Sea. As soon as the hijackers' plane took off, the American Air Force fighter jets went on alert and began pursuing it. After remaining airborne for 1.5 hours, the F-14 aircraft surrounded the plane and ordered the pilot to land at NATO's Sigonella Air Base in Italy. The pilot attempted to contact Egypt Air authorities, but the E-2C radar planes had already jammed the radio signals, because of which the pilot was unable to establish any contact with the Egyptian base. The pilot had no other option and redirected the aircraft towards Sicily. On the night of 11th October at 12:10 a.m., the aircraft landed at Sigonella Air Base in Sicily. No one had prior knowledge of this operation. Italy itself only learned about the operation when the aircraft was about to land at Sigonella Air Base. Now, because the aircraft had landed in Italy, the ship hijacked was Italian, and the murder had also taken place aboard an Italian ship. Italy had the primary right to take custody of the hijackers, but the United States wanted custody of them itself. 80 American commandos surrounded the landed aircraft, while 300 Italian commandos surrounded those American commandos. For several hours, meetings between Italian and American diplomats continued. Finally, by morning, a call came from Washington ordering the American soldiers to stand down. The agreement between Italy and the United States was made on the condition that Italy would ensure punishment for the hijackers. Italian troops found not only the 4 hijackers inside the aircraft, but also another important figure, Abu Abbas, the leader of the PLF and the man sent by Yasser Arafat. Because of Abu Abbas's presence on the aircraft, it was believed that he himself had planned the entire hijacking. However, whether Yasser Arafat knew about it or not was never confirmed. Due to lack of evidence connecting him directly to the hijacking, Italy released Abu Abbas, while the 4 hijackers were prosecuted and sentenced. The hijacker who murdered Leon Klinghoffer was Yusuf Mulki, who was sentenced to 30 years in prison, while the other 3 hijackers received sentences ranging from 15 to 25 years. It was later revealed that they had never intended merely to hijack the ship. Instead, they wanted to use the cruise ship to carry out an attack on Israel, and this step had been taken in response to recent Israeli bombings. Leon Klinghoffer's body was recovered 5 days later, on the 13th of October, from the Syrian coast. After a post-mortem examination, his body was sent back to his home country.
If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe to Sanjiv Uncovered for more such incredible stories and real-life mysteries.